Leclerc.
Charles Leclerc!
Welcome to Negative Camber, the Motorsport Show.
Far enough back, he's going to make the lunge down the inside!
The ultimate pit stop.
The safety car is coming in.
Fueling your passion for motorsport.
With an emotional moment that means everything.
All of the latest results, analysis, and interviews.
Roar the drivers on to the final lap of this race.
I'm Jamie Lemura, motorsport enthusiast, historian, and media presenter.
And I'm Lee Harrison, motorsport professional, Sprintmaster Australia race driver, and Formula One alumni.
Welcome to Negative Camber. Well, this man is one of Australia's leading motorsport journalists and presenters. He has previously worked for the likes of Channel 10, Channel 9, Channel 7, SBS and Fox Sports, commentating probably all of Australia's major motorsport events. These days, he's actually the lead voice behind the Super Cheap Autos TCR series and produces the famous Rusty's Garage and more recently, The Grill. Please welcome to the show, the legend, Greg Rust.
Hi.
G'day, Rusty. How are you?
It's fantastic to be on the show, and I don't know about legend, guys, but it's always good to talk a bit of cars, bikes, or motor racing for sure.
Oh, mate, don't worry. There's definitely lots of admiration from this neck of the woods. I've been listening to you pretty much since you started commentating the Super Touring series here in Australia a long, long time ago.
That brings up some great memories for me.
Yeah, no, great series, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I guess, how are you finding life in New Zealand, and how's COVID been impacting you in particular?
The challenges obviously at the moment with lockdowns on both sides, that makes life a little bit tougher. But I am involved in a variety of different projects. Some of them on this side here as well, working with Sky in New Zealand, and I've spent a good chunk of time at the beginning of the year in Australia working on the TCR series for 7. So when the bubble was in action with the two countries, it was very effective. But others have been way more affected than I have. So I certainly can't complain. My wife's a Kiwi, so we've been living here since the end of 2017. We were in Sydney for sort of 20 years prior to that, and she grew up here, so that's one of the reasons that we're in this part of the world, and that's been a significant lifestyle change, but a very nice one.
Yeah, very nice. How'd you come about the grill and that project? How did that all come about?
Just breaking up, just...
They were looking to find something that was French and industry and some very background. And other stuff.
Just break up a little bit there, Greg, mate. Just move around for a little bit. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
And radio show.
Sorry, Greg.
Rusty's Garage, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So far, it's going well.
That's all right, mate. Sorry, mate. We've just had a little bit of a break up there, so I'll have to get you to move around a little bit. So apologies for the break in transmission. So, how did you get into motorsport commentary?
It kind of came about a little bit by default in some ways. I was racing go-karts. I was very average at that, and basically the karts were at a major race meeting in Sydney this particular weekend. It used to be called the Triple Challenge over the Australia Day long weekend. It was a very famous event that involved supercars, the Australian Superbike Championship, and then at night time when all the circuit racing ended, they would fire up the drag strip, and it just became this awesome event. Anyway, the karts were there this particular year. I wasn't racing. The club asked me would I go and talk to Andy Raymond and Greg McShane and others that were commentating at the time over the big screen and the like. I did that. I was a bit reluctant to do it at first. And at the end of it, the producer said to me, have you done this before? I said, no. He said, do you want to do it again? I said, yes. And so the journey kind of commenced. I worked at the time in finance, and banking, and I started more or less moonlighting on weekends, and I went off and studied and learned. I had quite a significant career change in my early 20s, and a very supportive boss at the time who encouraged me to pursue it, which was, and family for that matter too, who were right behind me, which is good. I thought my parents would freak about a massive change of career and perhaps some of the uncertainties around that. And they couldn't have been more supportive, and off it went.
Yeah, and I guess for yourself, I mean, you've probably commentated with so many, I suppose, famous motorsport identities. Who are some of the most memorable people that you've worked with, and why are they memorable for you?
Very fortunate to do a couple of events with the late great Murray Walker. That is uppermost in my mind, given his passing this year. And he could not have been a greater example of just how you go about things. He was universally loved by everyone in the Formula One paddock, incredibly down to earth despite all the things that he'd achieved. He really should have been knighted, in my opinion. So there's one example at one end of the scale. Work's afforded me the opportunity to do interviews with the likes of Will Ferrell, Mario Andretti in the motor racing realm, to call Barry Sheen, a colleague and a friend, was enormously special, very, very special. And they're things I don't take for granted, guys. There are moments where I do pinch myself and count myself very, very lucky to have. However, those moments have come about to have crossed paths with them. It's very cool.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about Barry, because I remember in the early days, especially with Channel 10, when you guys were covering the MotoGP together, and then RPM as well with Bill Woods. I mean, they were some really special times. What was Barry like?
Just bigger than we perhaps realised here in Australia. I mean, in the UK, he was a genuine rock star. I mean, if you went to any events with him in the UK and you saw the adulation and, paparazzi and things like that, I mean, he was massive. And yet in the same breath, we would be out at a restaurant in Adelaide for the Adelaide 500 or something along those lines, and he would freely stop and talk to anybody, have a great conversation with them. He'd be very interested in their car, their motorcycle, their family, whatever it may have been, in terms of the topic of conversation at the time. He'd always have a laugh and be up to, cheeky hijinks. Life and work for him, we'd be counting down to the start of a broadcast, and he'd turn to you and he'd look you in the eye and he'd say, "Here, let's have a laugh." That was his mantra. He wanted to ensure that it was fun, and it's a philosophy that we could all take a bit of something out of that, because it's true. If you're enjoying yourself with your radio show that you boys do such a good job with, that passion seeps through the speakers to those listening at home. If you're having fun, they're generally having fun too.
Yeah, look, and that's something that I guess from our perspective we certainly try and do is to articulate what can be a really complex and technical sport, and sports, because we cover more than just tin tops. It's MotoGP as well, which we'll touch on shortly. To try and articulate our passion, but then keep it simplistic so the everyday listener can understand is a challenge, but it's one that we actually really enjoy trying to unravel, I guess.
You walk a tightrope, don't you? And don't ever lose sight of the fact that whilst our purists, whilst our diehard followers of the sport are always very interested in some of those intricate things that you're talking about technically, we can never lose sight of the fact that it's a human game too, and there are some very different personalities in our sport and the various derivatives of the sport, and getting into a position. That's probably why, as time went on, I thrived more, I think, in an interview sense, a bit like I'm doing now with the podcasts, but also in the pit lane with various forms of racing, and whether that be just pit lane commentary or hosting from the pit side of things. I just thrived in that environment because all I was endeavouring to do, my philosophy was really simple, and that is if I can try and think of what the audience at home would be contemplating or thinking at the time, and then try and get the person I'm with, at the end of the day, the people don't want to hear from me. I'm a conduit to the people they really want to hear from, the driver, the rider, the team member, whoever it might be, and getting that person to showcase some of their personality, to come forth with the answer that the audience at home wants to know. If I can do that, then that's box ticked for me.
Yeah, and look, we aspire to, both Lee and myself aspire to sort of go down that same path, and inspired by the likes of people like yourself and Neil Crompton, Mark Scaife, all the major commentators that we listen to on a well, I suppose weekendly basis, and even the guys from Sky Sports like Crofty and Martin Brundle as well. I mean, they've all inspired us and influenced us to do what we do and do what we love.
Cool. Well, I mean, that's the thing. And, when you get the chance to meet some of those, guys and girls, if there's a few little anecdotes they can share with you, little things they've learnt along the way, because everyone learns, in this game. It's a tough game. You are, if you make a mistake, you're making a mistake in the public eye, and you're doing it around the game that you love. So invariably you toughen yourself in those moments. But pick yourself up, keep boxing on, learn from some of those mentors, those good people, and come back to the core stuff that we've just talked about in relation to passion for it. My mother, every day, guys, before I do a broadcast, will still even now say just simple stuff like keep your feet on the ground. It's about the sport and about those people. That's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, what would be the greatest race you have felt you've called or witnessed, and what made it so good for you?
I struggle to answer these because, firstly, when I was very young, before I could even walk, I was going to places like the Sydney Showground Speedway with my family. My family have always loved motor racing, so that's where the true love of it comes from. So over time, I've been able to go to a number of races, either on a personal level or on a professional level, and tick a few bucket list things that I've always wanted to do. So, for example, I went to Le Mans in 2015 when Mark Webber was driving for Porsche.
Yep.
To see those cars running around that famous track and to stay awake for 30 hours or whatever it was. I mean, they were like slot cars, those things around there. They're just real-life slot cars. They were just amazing.
Yeah.
But I'd always wanted to go to Le Mans. I've been to Laguna Seca for some sports car racing and other things there, to Daytona, British Grand Prix, MotoGP and Formula One in Spain, some testing even at Jerez in Spain, and to various Formula One factories. So when you're fortunate to do those sort of things, to say, what was the one that really stood out the most, or what was the one that is your favourite? It is very difficult to narrow down to one. What I probably would say, in all honesty, the one that still, even now, gets the hairs on the back of your neck up was Bathurst 2006, when we'd gone from losing Peter Brock just a month beforehand, and then Craig Lowndes wins at the day that we farewelled his mentor, as Lee Diffie said on the day so famously. And to be around pit lane and to interview some of those guys, to talk to Greg Murphy before he got in one of the Brock Tiranas and things like that. That to me is indelibly imprinted in my mind, even now, all these years on. And then one that is perhaps not for emotive reasons like that would certainly be being in the pit lane when Greg Murphy came back in from the lap of the gods in 2003, and to see the crowd standing above in the corporate boxes above the pit lane, hanging over to watch Murph come in the lane, to see his colleagues and rivals come out of their pit bunkers to congratulate him, and then to just fortuitously be the person there, the first to talk to him in a professional sense in that interview. That's a very special one for me.
Yeah, Greg lives down the road or across the road from you in New Zealand as well, where you live?
Yeah, we're not too far apart from each other. We could more or less see each other's place from where we are, and there is a little bit of a connection there away from the track. My wife went to high school with him, so they're all friends from way back. So crazily, we get so busy with different things, we don't always get to see each other. But we've literally seen each other today. We've been on a classic car run here today, so we've got to catch up with one another, which is good. But I've always tried, guys, with that stuff to, on a professional level, just be equal and fair to everybody. It's a political game, and you hear lots of different, stories and things, and as best you can, be everyone's mate. Sometimes you've got to ask a tough question, but I think if you're fair to everyone, they respect it when you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And
brace yourself for the Soddy experience at Pro Karts Race Centre, the official South Australian distributor for Soddy karts. Picture this: karting excellence meets global dominance, all on our local tracks. Soddy karts are more than machines, they're powerhouses of victory. From the heart of France to the South Australian circuit, they dominate in all categories. But that's not all. When you race with a Soddy kart, you're backed by on and off-track technical support directly connected to the factory. It's not just karting, it's the Soddy advantage. Get ready to experience world-class performance, unmatched thrill, and victory like never before. Rev up for the Soddy experience, only at Pro Karts Race Centre. Visit prokartsracecentre.com.au or pop in for a chat at 30 Research Road, Paraka. Pro Karts Race Centre, fueling your passion, igniting your potential.
Getting back to races and stuff, 06 still hurts for me. My boy Mark Scaife lasted 350 metres, and then I didn't watch the TV for probably a good hour and a half recovering from that moment myself. But I'll never forget that day in a hurry, that's for sure.
Well, we're all born of that, aren't we? In terms of at the end of the day, when you peel away whatever it is that you do, if you work around the sport, either in the media or in the pit lane or in race control or whatever you do, at heart we're all fans. And I think that's Neil Crompton summed that up recently in a conversation he had with Aaron Noonan. That that's what drives you. There are days where it wears you down for different reasons. It is a tough business, and if you don't. If you can't live with that in the sense of if it gets you down or if it then you perhaps shouldn't play in that game. But in reality, there are some enormously rewarding days as well, and it is infectious like that. And no matter what, people like Neil in particular, they've just always had a deep love of the sport, and whatever it is that they're doing around it, the very first thing at their core in relation to that work is a pure love for the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, tell us about your thoughts on this year's TCR season. How do you feel, I guess, this series compares with, say, the old Super Touring era here in Australia in the mid to late 90s?
Well, my phone may have broken up before, but I have very fond memories of Super Touring. The people that were involved in the production back then are very dear friends to this day that I work with on the Singapore Grand Prix coverage, for example, and others. They're properly into their car racing, and they did a few groundbreaking things with the Super Touring coverage back then. So a bit of what I'm doing now really does, all these 20-odd years on, tap back into a bit of that in some ways. I'm loving the freshness of it. It's different. It doesn't have to be perceived as a rival thing. I love the fact that it's been able to get a Chaz Mostert, attract a Michael Caruso and others to come and play at the same time. They're a unique beast. I've had the chance to drive one, and I didn't drive it very well, guys. It was in damp conditions at Queensland Raceway, but it does give you, as a very average, driver, a sense of what they are confronted with and what they need to do to be competitive in them. So I thought it was very clever last year how they would bring out various international drivers so that ours could benchmark themselves against them, those that were well experienced and well versed with TCR. It makes sense that there's a global formula that that where I think it's important, probably the biggest thing is that it's going to give, hopefully when COVID settles down, a young driver a chance to showcase their wares in this series, and then get a chance to go and race abroad against some of the world's best, and that won't be a big step outside the known quantities. You'll know the car, and okay, it might be a different circuit and so on, but at least the base parameters you're very familiar with. It's not something totally different. So I love the freshness of it. The people that I'm involved with on the broadcast side of it, from I've known Barrett's for years, but Molly Taylor was my first ever podcast in Rusty's garage. David Reynolds and I are constantly laughing, and Jack Perkins is someone that. Let me tell you, we talked about Barry Sheen at the top of this call. I can remember Baz bringing a very young Jack Perkins into the commentary box at Winton, and he would have maybe not even been a teenager back then. He might have been 10 at best. Yep. And to see him and the way that he has applied himself and taken what he knows about race driving, and then worked with people like Barrett's and some of the good people at Channel 10 that I've known and worked with over time, and then just working with him, and he soaks all that up, and he's got a great choice of words. He's enormously genuine on camera, so all of these things coming together, some people that are newer to television but are really applying themselves incredibly well, plus some good very slick operators behind the scenes in a producing sense. Yeah, to me, it was just time. It was just nice to do something new, and I've loved every minute of it so far. Yeah,
I watch it religiously on 7 or 7 Play, 7 Plus, I think it is, and it takes me back to that super touring era, which is one of my favourite eras of Australian and I suppose international motorsport when you factor in the BTCC. Who've been your biggest surprises and I guess disappointments in the series so far this year?
Biggest surprises. I knew Josh Buchan would be very good, just from his, where I've observed him in a driver training sense, or in some of those environments where he's working with manufacturers and so on. So it was really good to see him, get on the podium, and that this again is, when I talked about people benchmarking themselves against international drivers, it's a great chance for a guy like that to race wheel to wheel with a Chaz Mostert, and for us as a sport to uncover a new face to the game, not someone who's a total rookie, because he's obviously got some experience, but it's not a name that people necessarily know in their living rooms at home. So from that point of view, I think it's great. It's awesome that young Ben Bargwanna has emerged, and being there with his dad, and sometimes they even drive the truck to the race meeting. I think that's just awesome. Michael Caruso, I've said for ages, should be in a full-time drive still in Supercars, and okay, that hasn't happened at the moment, but the fact that he's with us in TCR is huge, and kudos and credit to the team at Walkinshaw Andretti United that they give Chaz permission to come and play with us, and Chaz just loves driving, he just loves racing, so it's something very different. He jumps in the GT car, as you boys would have seen as well, and that's the other thing that I find enormously attractive about the series, is that you could call it an undercard, but really it isn't, because S5000, GT, you name it. I mean, the Trans Am has just come on in leaps and bounds. It's a really solid offering right across the board. Yeah,
it's funny that you mentioned that. I was actually going to be leading into my next question. With it's pretty much almost laid down Mazzy now that ARG and Supercars are going to merge, or ARG will take over. Where do you see the future of both categories, both TCR and the undercard that they've got there, or support categories you've got, and with Supercars? Where do you see that going moving forward for both classes?
It's a difficult one to answer, because I don't get involved in all the the behind-the-scenes stuff that has been reported. I haven't even actually spoken to management about that because basically I'm just endeavouring to do what I do in a television sense. I mean, if I look at it in a hypothetical sense and the people that are being spoken about in the press that are reportedly a part of this potential bid, there's some very good people there, some people that administratively know how to run the sport, people that I've worked with behind the scenes at Supercars for years that now work there. There are those that are a proper automotive and racing people. And then you've got, the likes of Mark Scaife and TLA, who in a marketing sense are very, very slick. So, long way to go, not a long way to go, but there is a ways to go, I think, in that process yet. It's confidential, and I as I said at the beginning of this comment, I don't really know where it is at. But if it were to be them, the people that I've worked with so far on both sides of it are incredibly capable, very good people. If, and I underscore that word, if it were to be them, they'd have nothing but absolute support from me because they're good. And let's just stop for a second and think about the rival bit here as well. To think that you could garner interest reportedly from the likes of Peter Adderton, Mick Doohan, the Smiths, Paul Morris, the Brisbane Broncos. I mean, that just shows you what a dual sport this is and the potential that they see in it. I think that's cool.
Yeah, 100%, and I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, there's been, I'd say, a fair majority of negative press about supercars, fair to say, over the last sort of 12 to 24 months, but clearly there's plenty, as you've said, out there, and big players that definitely see some potential still in the sport for sure, which is great. It needs it.
Well, I mean, you could, like anything in life, it's what you choose to do, isn't it? I mean, you can be glass half full about what you've got, the great product, its history, the players that are currently in it, the cars that are on the horizon. I mean, there's lots to be positive about. I can see why there might be some that are negative in relation to, the departure of Holden, but I mean, that's not Supercars' fault. Yeah. That's a blow for the Aussie automotive industry generally. That if you said tomorrow that you couldn't buy an iPhone anymore, you'd be up in arms, wouldn't you? I mean, it's just unfathomable to think of that. But, like anything, as in the same way that AFL and rugby league continue to evolve and how we have to sit back and think of ways to attract younger viewers. And, my kids said to me tonight, for example, I have teenagers, and, they said to me tonight, Dad, we actually like that sprint race for qualifying at the Italian Grand Prix. Yep. And to me, I'm a purist. I sort of said, oh, really? I enjoyed it. I was thrilled for Daniel and all of those things. And I at the end of the day, I still love racing. But I still love the traditional qualifying format. But what it made me do was pull the blinkers back for a moment and go, hang on a minute. This is resonating with young kids who are, A, liking Drive to Survive and may not have necessarily been Formula One fans before, and they can see the beauty in a quick, snappy race. There's still a presentation of sorts of medals at the end. Okay, you're not a Grand Prix winner. You've been awarded, because of your race results, a grid position for the Grand Prix tonight. But I did have to stop for a minute and go, you know what, just because I love the traditional stuff doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing things and trying things to ensure that we embrace a younger audience as well. And that can be in lots of different ways. Race formats, what the cars and the category looks like generally, but importantly, the way that we engage with fans, the things that we do to connect with fans. Us here talking on the radio, we already love it. That's done. What we need to do is to get our friends or our friends' kids or whatever it might be that only have a passing interest or might only be interested in it because you and I are watching it, to watch it a bit more regularly, to get acquainted with a Cam Waters or to learn about Brock Feeney or to get behind Shane Van Gisbergen, whatever it might be. That's the stuff we need to be working on, whoever wins that bid.
Yeah, here, mate. And look, we would have, and I do have so many more questions that I'd love to cover, but we'd have to go to our 8 o'clock news break. Thank you so much for coming on air and joining us, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. I do want to do this again and probably as a proper podcast and have you on for as almost 1-to-1, and we can talk for hours if you wanted to. But it's been a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Keep powering, guys, and it was a pleasure to chat. Hope everyone enjoys the GP tonight. Cheers.
Yeah, see you, mate. Thank you.
You've reached the checkered flag of another episode of Negative Camber, the Motorsport Show. A huge thank you to you, our incredible listeners. Your support and passion for motorsports fuels our enthusiasm to bring you the latest results, analysis, and interviews from the racing world. Keep that FOMO at bay by subscribing to Negative Camber on your favourite podcast platform. We'd also love it if you could leave us a review and share the show with fellow racing enthusiasts. Your feedback and support mean the world to us. Remember, Negative Camber is more than just a podcast. We're a community of dedicated fans who live and breathe motorsports. Follow us on socials, join us on our website, negativecamber.co, and be sure to subscribe to the Negative Camber Club for access to exclusive content, episode previews, and special deals from our amazing partners. A huge thank you goes out to our podium partners and our incredible sponsors. Your partnership allows us to continue bringing you this show and dive deeper into the world of motorsports. If your business adds value to the motorsport community, get in touch with us to become a Negative Camber partner. So until next time, stay fueled with passion, embrace the Negative Camber, and keep chasing those podium finishes.